Ali Baba was a woodcutter who lived on the edge of a bustling market town. He rose before dawn, swung his axe until the sun eased gold into the sky, and sold his cut wood for whatever coin the butcher or baker would spare. He had little, but he had enough to sleep with both cheeks against each other and wake without complaint. His brother Kasim lived in a larger house and kept a shop. Kasim had learned to count wealth the way others learned to count prayers. He'd had maps for bargains and edicts for savings. Still, nothing bound the two brothers in law or ledger. They shared only a roof at times, and on quieter nights, the memory of a childhood that had not yet been divided by appetite. One afternoon, while Ali Baba gathered driftwood from the river, he saw a line of horsemen crest the hill like thunder made solid. They halted at the ford. The leader was a man with weathered skin and eyes like flint. He spoke briefly, and men set down chests and heavy sacks. They moved with the silence of those who hold secret things and the speed of those who do not wish to be seen. Ali Baba crouched behind a fallen oak and watched until the last horseman vanished down the lane, and the last hoofprints melted into dust. Curiosity is a kind of hunger. It led him through hedges and over a low wall, and finally to a cleft of rock in the hills, where, to his astonishment, the world opened into a mouth of dark stone. Before the cleft hung a face of weathered rock, with no door nor handle, only a round space, as if the hill had swallowed a moon. Ali Baba knelt and listened. From within came a rumble like many feet and a whisper of breath, as if the hill itself exhaled. He could not tell whether the sound was storm, animal, or human craft. He waited until the horseman had gone and the sheep bells near the valley tolled. He stepped forward. When he had the courage to speak, his voice was small and foolish in the great throat of stone. "Open sesame," he said, because stories had taught him that secret words belong first to danger and then to chance. The cleft opened. The rock did not move like a door, but yielded like a hand releasing. Ali Baba blinked at darkness, and then at a passage lit by braziers, and then at a cavern that breathed with warmth and light. Piles of chests lay there, many and tidy, the air between them scented with cedar and old coin. Jewels winked from velvet rags. Goblets and carpets and chains lay folded like quiet arguments. He realized the truth as if cold water touched his face. This was a hoard, immense and not his, tended by those who rode horses and spoke in flint. He filled his arms with a single chest heavy as a promise, and carried it back home not by pride, but by the urgent, simple need of a man who believes one good fortune might bend the rest of his life into a gentler shape. He buried the chest under his bed and did not tell his wife or even his cat. Yet chests and secrets grow teeth if not aired. Luck, once uncovered, wants to be seen. Word of sudden coin finds its own echo. Kasim, who had learned to smell profit the way a hound smells rain, came to Ali Baba's door with a dozen codicils of questions and no loyalty. Greed is a loud animal. He forced Ali Baba to show him the cave and persuaded him, by herding his brother's caution into a corral of promises, to repeat the words that opened the rock. When Kasim stood before that sea of riches, his eyes made a weather fair of their own. He forgot the hands that had carried wood at dawn. He forgot the rhythm of true labor. He forgot the small rules that keep knaves from cliffs. He took chest after chest and filled a cart until the cart groaned and the mules were near their knees in treasure. Returning at dusk, Kasim stumbled. In the press of his haste, he dropped the password. He forgot to speak it, and the rock closed while he still stood half within the cave, half without it. In that hush between the world and the stone, the horsemen returned. But the flint in their eyes found a new figure to be angered at, a man trapped, with chest and coin. They took him. They took his breath and left the secret of the cave to swallow the sound of struggle. When Ali Baba and the villagers searched, they found only a cart overturned on the hawthorn and a trail of trampled grass. Qasim's fate thudded through the town like a bell announcing a storm. Ali Baba hid the truth in his heart like a bruise. He wrapped his grief in silence and chalked his brother's absence on the doorframe of his days. But the story does not end in absence, because other players still moved in that dark theater. Among them was a slave woman named Morgiana. She belonged to Qasim, but had been freed in payment for loyalty and wits when she saved a merchant from an unjust debt. She had the eyes of someone who measures people by what they will do when they are frightened, and the mouth of someone who keeps secrets in service and not in greed. Ali Baba had hired her after Qasim's disappearance, and she proved to be the kind of servant whose wisdom is heavy with sharp edges. The thieves, who had once ridden flawless in secret, suspected betrayal. They did not know the full map of the town, for thieves who carry iron and blood seldom carry patience for detail. They devised a cunning plan. Under the moon, they hid themselves in oil jars, great jars like those used to store harvest, and they sent them one by one into Ali Baba's house by night, intended to wait until dawn to spring out and drag him, bewildered and bound, back to the cleft of rock. They were fools to think they could bury men in clay and not recognize the smell of fear. They were more foolish still when they entrusted the key of their ambush to the hands of a servant who watched more than she leaned. Morgiana, who polished more than plates and who listened when others breathed, noticed the jars and smelled the hitch under the lid. She was a creature of improvisation. She set the kettle on the flame and stoked it until it sighed. Then, with a calm only the resolute carry, she poured boiling oil into every jar. As dawn painted the sky in myself and then in more, the thieves shed their jars and leapt up expecting an easy kill. Instead, they found death waiting in copper and steam, and their plan became a heap of ash and silence. Morgiana sealed the lids again, and when the village woke, she let no one know of what hadn't been. The leader of the thieves was a man of craft as well as cruelty. He counted loss like others count days. He felt embarrassment ripple like an old brand. He traced clues and learned of a small woman with quick hands and a house that smelled of both wood smoke and victory. He came to Ali Baba's door not as a thief, but as a merchant in a cloak, and he spoke in soft voices that could tempt a miser. He offered to buy Ali Baba's house, to rent it, to turn it into a shop, to lease him a life less troubled by chests and by secret things. He pleaded the merchant's language until Ali Baba's ears, tired of silence, agreed to show him hospitality. He asked her to measure the grain, to help barter a deal. Morgiana met him with the same eyes that had boiled the jars. She made tea and she watched the shadows under his smile. The leader, boastful enough to throw caution upon a cart, hid his face and his fate in riddles. He sent a slave to measure distance from house to gate and had the will to sketch trenches of a plan. Morgiana bent a needle and sewed a thread of truth through the fabric of his falsehood. She learned his whereabouts and the hour he chose to return to his men. That night, when the leader climbed to set his signal flame, Morgiana used the same cunning that had saved Ali Baba. She gave him a small token of trust in return, a cup of oil promised to warm the road. He took it greedily and left. When he walked away, she marked the path and followed it to the hidden hollow where the thieves kept their cart and their shame. She watched, she waited. In a single motion, as if the world had been arranged to her fingers, she stole away with the leader's scarred coin purse and the map of the secret cave. She returned and told Ali Baba the chart and all she had learned. He wept not for greed now, but for Qasim, for the narrow turns that had taken his brother. Together, they contrived not to seize the hoard, but to end the danger. Ali Baba set the stones that would block the road between greed and ruin. Morgiana, who had become a bright, ironic justice, tricked the thieves by planting misdirection and by letting the leader believe his pride had dignity. The thieves found themselves at dawn not kings of shadow, but prey to the law of small folk who had sharpened their minds sharper than swords. In time, the cleft closed to the public. Ali Baba kept one small key at his pocket and the name of the opening on his tongue like a word. He kept it not to become a lord, but to ensure no other Qasim slipped between appetite and the dark. Morgiana remained at his hearth, no longer a thing to be sold and bought, but a guardian who had learned how to boil betrayal and make it safe to speak of. When the town needed a heart healed, she mended it with bread and a wisdom that refused to be cheap. Gratitude came in modest quarters. Ali Baba used the coin to mend the roof and feed the hungry at market. He gave a portion to the widow of a man whose cart had been overturned in the panic, and he bought a coat for the apprentice who had been frightened into silence. He did not display chests in his yard, nor flaunt the jewels at festival. He learned that a sudden gift unshared tastes like fear, and so he offered it the world in small measures. As for Qasim, history folded him into the record of those lost to the cave and not recovered. In the quiet of some nights, Ali Baba would sit at his window and speak the brother's name into the stars and hear nothing heavier than the step of time. He never forgave the greed that had led his brother into the stone mouth, yet he forgave the hunger in himself that had first bent his back to carry wood. All men have hunger, he learned, and the craft is to turn it into work rather than theft. Morgiana, who had saved the home by the heat of a kettle and the coolness of cunning, eventually walked into a new life in which she owned a small parcel of land and grew figs that tasted of sunlight. Ali Baba married true quiet and kept the key far from sight. Sometimes children would gather and ask for the story of men and jars and a word that opened a cave. He would look at them the way a man looks at a map and choose his ending. Some nights he would say, "Open sesame," and the children would clap as if they had seen coins. On other nights he would say, "Keep your hunger honest," and the children would consider hewn wood and the slow art of gathering a life. The thieves were counted and buried in a place where traitors do not travel. The town learned to speak of secrets with a careful hush, and a new rule settled like mortar. If a treasure is found, a duty comes with it. Every coin must buy something that feeds more than one mouth, so the market became kinder by degrees. And so the tale closes not in a single triumphant shout, but in small changes. A boiled kettle that saved a house, a ring of coins used to mend a roof, a man who learned to love honest labor more than sudden fortune, and a clever woman who turned oil into justice. The cleft in the hill remains a thing of shadow to those who roam high roads. For all that, the better story is held in the village, where men learned that secrets can be dangers. But cunning and kindness are the truest keys.